Well, hello there. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Simba's Twin, the Lion King, Part 10. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
First POV. I remained on top of the eland, my jaw clamping down on his neck with the cruelty of a hungry beast. I felt his lungs collapsing and his heart losing rhythm as life slowly drained from his body. Once a proud animal that roamed the savannah, now it was like any other food underneath me. It's funny, really, how one animal could drag another so low from what they were before. Our struggle and the copious amount of blood that came out churned the ground into a fine mud. It was like the earth was bleeding too, and not just my prey. Vultures made their presence known in the sky. They made some kind of wheel formation above the fallen prey, and they sang a song of death and victory. The cries of the eland never stopped. Animals smart enough to talk meant that there was at least some kind of connection between them. The females and the calf had run off. It was the 6 other males that were still in the area. Their bellow was long and whining, kind of like cries, but it was not only sadness or mourning. The sound gave anger and bitterness too. All focused on me. Finally, I released my jaw from its death grip. My cheek ached a little from the sheer strain of the bite. The eland had a very thick neck that was tough and hard to clamp down. I had to brute force through all the fats to choke the prey. It was no easy task. I remained on top of my prey as I took greedy breaths. My tongue came out as I began panting rapidly. It was still noon, even though the sun was starting to fall a bit from the peak of the sky. The heat was still there, and the evaporated sweat and blood caused the smell of iron to spread. But as I rested there, looking extremely fatigued, the other males began gathering around me. They probably thought they could at least take revenge on their fallen comrade and kill the existing threat, which was me. I growled. The low vibration was sent through the ground, and they felt it. They dispersed a bit, but never for too long, because they came again. Minutes passed as I caught my breath, but the remaining eland never bothered to leave. I glared at them, not knowing if I should be impressed at their persistence or be disappointed at their sheer stupidity. One eland in particular came close, too close to my liking. He was much smaller than the one I took down, probably a few 100 kilograms smaller. He shared a very similar scent to the dead prey, so I assumed they had a connection. Seeing the eland was a mature male, I assumed the one approaching me was the son or something. This particular eland continued to push its luck. It came close to me with its head low on the ground, ready to explode skywards and spear me from the underbelly. It got to the point that he was getting into range. At that point, I no longer warned. "If you insist, more is always better," I said, and took my last and final breath before I exploded out. The eland was already close to me, so I was able to swipe my paws at him. He reacted fast, but his reaction was not to attack but to move back. My paw found his face in a clean flush. A deep thudding sound of paw-smashing skull could be heard. That was not all. My claws raked him down the face when I hit. My curved claws were hooks made of keratin, and I latched onto the skin of his face. I raked down a line, and then it got stuck on his sensitive nose. The eland bellowed loudly and pulled even harder, causing my claws to split his nose in sections. And then he ran. But at that point it was too late. I followed after him. I was quite fatigued from my previous hunt, but the adrenaline had not completely left my system. I chased him for a few meters before taking him down, similar to my first prey. We crashed. We tumbled. His bellow turned into a pure scream of horror. The sound and the scene finally destroyed all remaining bravery, even for the other elands, as they finally left the open plain. "You should have run," I said, and repositioned myself on top of him. He was panicking and trying to escape. I noticed that he was much more of a coward than the previous one. I did not even have to fear for an attack much, so I pressured him sideways and began tearing at his underbelly instead of biting at his neck and trying to control the horns. His legs started thrashing and kicking wildly, but I could tank those wild flailing. My mane shook as I tore and tore into his insides. Raw violence was inflicted on the prey too young to understand danger. His hide was thick and layers of fat protected his vital organs. But my persistent tearing was able to get through them. His mindless struggle also helped me in killing him. After I sank my teeth, his own movement caused him to tear himself on my fangs. I just had to bite down really hard and never let go. Bite force was everything in this hunt. There was a release of gas when his inside got punctured and intestines started spilling. It was slow at first, like trying to squeeze something out from a small hole. But after that initial puncture, opening the wound was an easier task. The smell was absolutely putrid even for me, but I did what I had to do. After 10 minutes had passed, the eland was completely void of life. My face was completely covered in red blood and big intestines spilled halfway on the earth with thick dark blood. I released a huge breath after I was done and I somewhat collapsed on my prey too. I was completely drained of energy. Although the eland were not especially dangerous compared to the giants I've killed before, they still took quite a long time and effort to kill. Maybe that was because of how desperately they tried to survive, instead of fighting back. Buffalo, giraffe, and now eland, I said thoughtfully while propping myself up. That only leaves me with the big three to hunt down, I said. The said big three being hippos, rhinos, and elephants. A rather impossible hit list if I was being honest. After getting some time to rest, Rafiki and Grim came up to me. Taking down one was within my expectation, but two went beyond, Rafiki commented. Your prowess is truly remarkable. I can confidently say that you've surpassed your father twofold in this regard. PFT, but of course my lord is superior to other lions even if said lion is his own father, Grim said from the side. Protect my kills for a moment, Grim. I first need to return to the pride, I said and finally got off the eland again. As you command, Grim said, and I left it to him. The region was harsh with barely any animals. The lack of prey meant that there would even be less predators, so I was not too worried. Some jackals, foxes, or wild dogs the vultures could handle. And so I returned to the pride. I had covered quite a bit of distance in my hunt, so it took me half an hour to return. While I was on the way, I even heard the roars of the lioness. It was not a roar of dominance but a call, almost a plea, for me. It seemed they too had success in their hunt. I was greeted by all the members of the pride. Everyone had returned by then. There were also two carcasses that greeted me. One was a kudu and the other a hartebeest. The pride gave small bows and parted to make way for me as I came before those two carcasses. I raised an eyebrow seeing their bountiful size. Both parties had success? I asked the obvious. Yes. The hunting party led by Nydia and Nala was able to take down the kudu, whereas Zuri and her party were able to hunt the hartebeest, Esh answered. Is that so? I said while looking at the hunting members. I gave a small nod of acknowledgement. You did a splendid job. They gave pleased smiles in return. And so, under their watchful gazes, I dug into the food. I opened the carcass like a chairman opening an event. I ate the heart, lungs, and juicy bits of the animal before I moved to another one and did the same. The pride gathered around me, all of them standing at attention because all were starving. But no one intervened as I ate whatever parts one wanted. After I ate those, I moved away from the kills and gave the signal for the rest of the pride to begin eating too. And they did, with clear hunger and no manners, might I add. The two carcasses would provide around 250 kilograms of pure edible meat, excluding the insides, bones, etc. It was a lot of food but nowhere near close enough to feed more than 30 lions. The food completely disappeared in under 10 minutes. The cubs and the newcomers of the pride did not even get a bite in, and yet even those who ate were not full. They easily tore through everything. Lucky for them, that was only the appetizer. I had a success of my own in the hunt, I told them when they were starting to lick the bones clean and were considering eating it. You did? They asked collectively before looking around and searching for the scent of a new carcass in the end. I did not bring it with me because they were too big to carry, I said and finally got up from my seat. They? Zuri asked while coming to my side. Just follow me, I said. I led the pride towards the open plain where I had killed the eland. The pride were very excited to get more food, especially those that hadn't eaten. We reached the kill site sooner than expected. When we reached there, vultures had made a home in the open plain. They were everywhere, perching on every tree and on the ground. A group of thick black vultures stood atop the eland that I killed, but there was not a single bite missing on the meat. When they stayed on the ground like that, they looked even more intimidating than when they were in the sky. Suffice it to say, the kills were protected from any small predators and other scavengers. I was pretty sure even ants were not able to get a piece. When I strode towards the carcasses, the vultures parted or flew up in the sky to make way. There, I did the same thing I did with the two animals that the hunting party got. I opened up the carcasses and ate the insides. At that point, I was completely full. So I let the rest of the pride enjoy the meal. By the end, there was actually some meat remaining. Scar's old pride were very greedy when they got their chance, but even they were unable to finish everything. It was funny to see the look on their faces when they were unable to eat anymore. It must have been a long time since they had their stomach full. With my pride completely filled, I knew that the journey would be a bit easier. Rest for the rest of the afternoon. We will continue to move at night, I ordered, and everyone made camp in that open plain. When I was sitting peacefully, pleased females with full bellies began lining up to me. Although I knew I should rest, I kind of could not help it. And this time, I released everything with no care for pregnancy. I've heard that it was you who took down the hartebeest, I said while walking beside Zuri. The other lionesses are quite impressed. It was around midnight, and the pride was currently on the move. It was much better to travel in the night like this. We could cover more ground without the heat of the sun. There is nothing to be impressed about. I just saw an opportunity and took it, she said. There was a bit of shyness in her tone. No need to be humble about it. We learned to hunt together, and you were always a better hunter than me, I said. Although that could be attributed to my earlier struggle with my lack of tail, and because Sarabi never really bothered to teach me properly, thinking that I would never find success anyway with my lack of tail. My strategic mind helped immensely, but when it came to raw instinctive hunting that a lion should do, Zuri was always a bit above me in that regard. She shook her head. Not anymore. Now you hunt giraffes and eland. I remember you used to tell me how you planned to hunt all these giants while we would observe them at the watering hole, she said. And now you've done exactly what you said. I guess you really keep your word. I smiled, remembering that. I used to think of her as a pet cat during those days. I was still much more human-minded, and she was this lovable creature that would constantly follow me around. Zuri and I were in the lead while the rest of the group followed behind us at their own pace. But at some point, they released a roar that asked for a quick rest. When I went back to look, I realized that the cubs, specifically those that hadn't reached a year old from Scar's old pride, were quickly getting tired. There were 4 cubs of Scar in total. 3 of them were females, while the last one was male. The male cub was the youngest among the bunch, and he was also the one that got tired most quickly. Under Scar's rule, the male cubs were subjected to abuse. Scar feared competition even among his own cubs. It got to the point that he would sometimes kill his own sons if he found them rebellious or troublesome in the future. This male cub was also thinner and smaller than the female cubs. Clearly, Scar did not care much for him when he ruled, even though he was the father. So I approached the tired group of cubs. My eyes were locked on the weakest one, the male cub. "What's wrong, cub?" I asked. His face immediately flashed in panic. "Nothing, my lord. It's just. He stammered. "Didn't I give a separate meal for the cubs? Did you not eat enough?" I asked while absolutely towering over him. The pride had come to a stop by now, and everyone was watching the scene unfold. Even the female cubs moved away a bit, thinking they slipped past my eyes. "I did, it was the best meal I've ever had," he said, and then paused before his ears dropped and he looked down. I don't know why I am so weak either. I'm sorry, he said in his juvenile voice. No, not even juvenile, it sounded infant. I looked at the small cub become smaller under my gaze. To be honest, I was not trying to be too kind to Scar's legacies. But his vulnerable frame easily tugged at the heartstrings. Why was I upset at the cubs? If anything, I should be cold toward the adult members instead, who actually fought against us just a week ago. I sighed. Help the tired cubs, I commanded my pride. And after saying that, I created an example. I picked the small cub by the scruff and began carrying him. His body instinctively curled up, and I was able to carry him with ease. His weight was so light that I would not even notice. While carrying the cub, I headed forward to the front of the pride and began leading the journey again. What's your name, cub? I asked, my voice coming out a bit strange due to never opening my mouth. Kovu, my lord, he said while hanging from my jaw. It was natural for a cub to be carried like this, so he was comfortable even though it looked like he wouldn't be. Kovu, it's okay to be weak. What's not okay is staying weak. I want all the members of my pride to be strong, I said. From now on, eat as much as you can and try not to drag down the rest of the pride, I said, to which the cub nodded profusely. Yes. And stop moving so much, lest you fall, I said. He looked down at the height that he was. Although not deadly, a fall from my jaw would still be a long way down for the cub. He gulped. Understood, my lord, he said. And so, we continued our journey. Third POV. Serengeti. The whole of Serengeti was bleeding green. The herds had also come back from the Masai Mara and migrated back to the Serengeti. They had crossed the river, and now they were roaming the land that was starting to grow lush with green. It was the time of the year when the Serengeti was starting to look like a paradise again after years of looking like hell on earth. Turn the scene back to an open plain with green grass. Here, a carcass of a zebra lay. Surrounding it was a small clan of hyenas that had just hunted it down. Contrary to most belief, hyenas were not only scavengers, they were more than capable of hunting their own food, especially when prey was plentiful like this. They were opportunistic predators more than pure scavengers. The scene, although not significant, was an impactful event. Ever since Leo came to the Serengeti, he had beef with the hyenas, causing most of them to leave the Serengeti in search of new lands. Leo also had a relationship with the vultures, meaning that hyenas could not scavenge as much, so they were in a tight position. But ever since a few days ago, you could see hyenas returning to the Serengeti. These were the same hyenas that fought Leo back in the Pride Lands. They were a small clan that betrayed Scar at the last minute, and in return, Leo allowed them to live. So knowing that, the hyenas traveled back to the Serengeti, their old home. They were extremely excited to start a life here again, knowing they had earned the favor of the king. But alas, the hyenas were not so lucky. Their happiness was short-lived. They gathered around the zebra carcass and began eating it together. There was chaos, but since the clan was not too big, everyone would get their share. They didn't even have time to eat for long. After only a few minutes, they heard angry roars in the distance. No, not a roar, but roars. The hyenas widened their eyes. Their fur stood on end, and so did their short tails. They looked around fearfully, but it was all too late as the new kings of the Serengeti burst forth from the tall grasses. The hyenas dispersed. Those that tried to take a piece of meat with them lost their lives, as there was not only one lion but 4 prime lions. The 24 or so hyenas did not stand a chance. They ran, crying and whining. They cursed the unfair world as they were powerless to do anything to the lions. Their trauma from Leo only intensified their fear, so there was no fight in them. They ran for their lives. The new kings of the Serengeti caught 6 hyenas in total. There was no particular reason for doing this. They were just following the natural instinct of a predator to reduce competition. Lions and hyenas were always in rivalry. 5 hyenas died instantly, but the last one somehow survived. But she would not live for long because she was pinned down by one of the kings, Morani. You think you can hunt in our territory, huh? Think again, Morani said with a grin while he pushed his paw on the hyena's chest. He did not need to apply strength. His weight was enough to crush the smaller predator. The rest have escaped, Hunter said while circling back to Morani. I got 2 of them, Sikio said in a challenging voice while also circling back. That's good, Hunter said but trailed off until he revealed, for you. I got 3. Damn it. Sikio cursed out loud. Scarface also came toward Morani. He was not as active as his brothers. He did not even kill the hyenas, he only chased them away. He knew every animal had a role to play in the ecosystem. They were complaining about not having enough scavengers to clean the Serengeti, and now they were killing hyenas. It was honestly stupid in his opinion, but his brothers insisted. But still better than Morani. He got one, and it's not even dead, Sikio said with a laugh. Morani released a competitive growl and drew out his claws. The knives sank into the chest of the hyena, causing her to scream even louder than before. I think you should kill her quickly. No need to make her suffer, Scarface said when he came up to Morani. What? Feeling bad for the vermin? Hunter shot a question with a raised eyebrow. It's noisy, Scarface said while looking at Hunter. Hey, stop screaming, Morani said, but contrary to his order, he only began raking down his claws on her chest. The hyena cried. Why are you doing this? She said. Morani and the others tilted their heads, confused. Why were they doing this? Why wouldn't they be doing this? We got permission from the king. He promised we could live here in peace and he spared our lives, she said. What king are you speaking of? You are looking at the kings. Morani said with a growl, his teeth bared now. That seemed to clear the question for the hyena because she stopped screaming and instead focused more on trying to escape. No, you don't. Morani shouted, and then his head shot out, biting at the neck of the hyena. The hyena was in full survival mode as she flailed her awkward limbs wildly and her teeth snapped shut multiple times as if searching for something to hold. She only ended up biting off her tongue in panic. Lions, why are you so cruel to us? What have we ever done to you? She asked with her last bit of breath. I hope you know you crossed him. And I hope he makes you all suffer too. Then the snap of her neck silenced her. Her last words were not permitted to make sound. Bloody vermin thinks it can live while being so weak, Morani said with a disgusted spit. Indeed. There was no worse sin in the wild than being weak, Scarface thought to himself while looking at the crooked corpse of the hyena. She was thoroughly mauled by Morani. Let's chase after the rest, Hunter suggested after the kill was over. Don't we have anything better to do? Scarface sighed. Hey, we don't need to hunt. We have to keep our bodies sharp somehow, Sikio said. True, Scarface said, and they set out to cause more chaos in the land. They were kings, they were strong, and therefore they could do whatever they wanted. Their philosophy was tailored for the strong. It would be interesting to see how that changed when they were on the other end of the coin. What would they do when they were made weak by something so much stronger? They needed to see both sides to realize the truth. Until then, incomplete kings they were. The surviving hyenas ran far and wide, debating whether to leave the Serengeti once more. The Serengeti had been ruled by new kings in the absence of Leo. They only wished that the Real King remembered the atrocities they caused when he finally met them. Maybe, hopefully, he would deem their actions unforgivable. Third POV. Casual Geographic, a popular channel run by a young black man who talks through an earphone and has rapidly gained fame using his knowledge and blunt humor. He had a total subscriber count of 4 million. And this YouTuber decided to post a video that went absolutely viral 3 days after Leo's documentary episode 4. Said video was addressing the new hype that was Leo. The video was titled, Leo's Current Power Level in the Documentary. Video starts. Leo's power level is just the newest online debate brought to you by people who have way too much time on their hands. And I'm no better because here I am, making a video about it, he said, appearing at the corner of the screen, and true to his channel name, he was very casual about the whole thing. I'm making this video because this seemingly harmless debate had quickly turned from an innocent debate to a huge joke that I am not in on. What's clear is that on one side, there are people who are absolutely glazing this lion to the point that his 30-plus females never did. And on the other, there are people who hate on these takes for absolutely no reason, he said, and the video began showing slides of clips from Leo's documentary. So in this video, we are going to talk about this issue you probably didn't even care about if you have an actual job. But just to make things clear, we are not talking about Leo in his prime or the old King Leo that you are probably familiar with if you follow the leaks that are more frequent than a baby with a diaper, he said, and then the scene abruptly cut to an image of Leo in his absolute prime. Yeah, fortunately, I am not tasked with explaining this absolute monstrosity that looked more AI-generated than ChatGPT. I've studied animal science for half my life now, and even then, I am just as confused and completely flabbergasted as the kindergartner who watched this, he said. That shitstorm is for future me, he chuckled nervously. But right now, we are going to talk about the watered-down version of this entity and talk about Leo in the current timeline of the documentary. Mind you, I say watered down only in comparison to his older self. What you are seeing now is a lion on steroids that The Rock had not even dreamt of. An absolute anomaly who decided to change animal science as a whole and piss on the line that separates reality from fiction, he said, and then deadpanned at the camera while showing Leo from the recent documentary. Meet cute Leo, and I mean cute in his prime perspective. But this so-called cute creature is able to murk almost all the animals that roam the planet and is currently the most dominant predator on the whole African continent, he said, showing different images of Leo covered so far by the documentaries. Lions in general are already disrespectful creatures. They don't just survive in the savannah, they run it like it was their criminal empire, and the only thing they are fighting with in the wild is themselves. Yes, while others are fighting for survival, lions are fighting themselves to get some pussy privilege and pee all over the land. Compare this to cheetahs, who gotta break the sound barrier to get food and, even after taking down prey, have to eat their food like a competitor in an eating contest before some hyenas or other predators steal their food. Or better yet, leopards who have to drag their food up a tree like it's a security deposit, and hyenas who have to chew on bones for food. They're so dominant the whole ecosystem has decided to just leave them be to do whatever they want. If they have a Yelp page, it will just say don't. And here's where it gets disrespectful. They are already living tanks with claws but still decided, hey, let's form a 10-member group and jump people. Like, bro, you are already an apex predator. Why do you need a gang? That's like Mike Tyson joining a mosh pit just to feel something. They should probably take something from their equal counterpart, the tigers who actually live solitary. They hunt in groups, not because they have to, but because they can. Just to make sure no animal evolves the confidence to challenge them, he said, showing different clips of normal lions this time. And then there's this dude. A lion who decided to speedrun evolution and built himself like a final boss just because once upon a time, someone stole his tail, he said, showing a picture of Leo in comparison. The only thing I can think of when looking at this picture is that God can be making anything, he said. The average lion weighs 200 to 250 kilograms, but this behemoth at the bright age of 3 weighs 360 kilograms. That's not a lion, that's a saber-tooth with Wi-Fi. He is like your grandfather, who had to walk both ways for 100 miles just to get to school, reborn in the easy mode of modern life. He looks like he is from the veteran mode of Earth that decided to be born in the tutorial mode of Earth. A lion that was meant to survive on Earth version 10 times more difficult, he said with a shrug. His shoulders are so broad he makes Cape Buffalo look undersized. He has muscles in places where muscles don't even belong. I swear his neck alone could file taxes as a separate entity. Now that we've gotten accustomed to this final boss of lions, let's talk about feats because that's really important to gauge his power levels. So far, We've seen Leo fold other lions like a bully who gets held back in the 4th grade 5 times. He changed the nickname of the Black Death to Black Dead by hunting them consistently and adding them into his diet like a bodybuilder adding more protein. He single-handedly unalived 3 legendary lion kings like they were domestic cats. And hyenas? We have seen him consistently beating the shit out of megaclans like a game character farming XP on lower-level demons, he said. Now if these feats are not enough to impress you, then seeing Diddy's lawyer getting him a sentence of only 50 months in prison probably wouldn't either. Leo looks like a complete beast, but I would honestly argue that his feats even surpassed his looks. Even with all the shock brought by his appearance, he is still like Arnold with a sleeper build, he said. But still, the wildest part of all this is that Leo is still just 3 years old. That age is still considered the teenage years even for lions. But don't let his age and size fool you, because you are looking at not just the biggest predator on the continent but also perhaps the fastest among them. And when I say fast, I mean acceleration. Because this is where Leo decided to disrespect the laws of physics and pretend gravity is not real. But don't get this messed up, because his top speed is thankfully average for lions, around 50 miles per hour, maybe even a little lower. And that's expected when you are a cat the size of a grizzly bear. What's not expected, though, is the ability to go from 0 to top speed instantly. And when I say instantly, I mean under a second instantly or blink of an eye instantly. When a normal lion goes from 0 to top speed, it takes a couple of seconds. You see the build-up, the push-off, and the lunge. Leo? Nah. He goes from 0 to a missile of terror instantly. He's got the kind of acceleration where if you blink, the prey's already filing a missing report. In biomechanical terms, this comes down to his fast-twitch muscle fibers. Lions already have around 60 to 70% of those, as they're built for explosive bursts, not endurance. But Leo's body composition is all gas, no brakes. His muscle density is higher, meaning his fibers contract harder and faster. That gives him crazy thrust power off the line. It's like watching a freight train hit the gas like a sports bike. Think about it this way. A normal lion takes about 1.5 seconds to hit 40 miles per hour. Leo does it in under a second. That means his acceleration curve is closer to that of a cheetah, but with 6 times the body mass. So when he lunges, the amount of kinetic energy behind him is so ridiculous it's like getting hit by a small car. Not even joking, a 360-kilogram lion accelerating at that rate hits with over 11,000 joules of force. If that's not a superpower, I don't know what is. He showed many clips of Leo hunting prey. These clips were not in the documentary per se, but could be found on the website where raw footage is posted regarding Leo. You ever seen a lion hit something so hard it looks like the prey got hit by lag? He asked, and then played the footage of Leo absolutely ragdolling an antelope after chasing it for only a few seconds. The more you know, he shrugged after showing that clip. Another reminder that Leo lost his tail at a young age, which means every ounce of his stability comes from sheer muscle coordination. His back, core, and hind legs are extremely overdeveloped to make all this movement possible. Imagine having no legs and still doing ballet better than anyone else on the planet. This is a direct result of the curious thing researchers had observed Leo do, that is, to train, he said. Imagine being born as the apex predator and God making you one of the deadliest animals on the planet, and yet you still choose to train to be more. That's exactly what he did ever since he was young. As a result, now he is built like a crime and there's nothing anyone can do about it, he said. Coupled with that speed and the bite force estimated to be triple that of other lions, you have yourself a murder cat that could run through all living beasts like it's a breeze. The only reason why you should sleep well at night knowing this nightmare-fueled creature shares the same planet is he's awfully fond of humans, he said. The screen showed clips of Leo and the researchers interacting. It even showed some funny pictures of the humans as they posed in front of the camera. Believe it or not, that is the only reason why Elon Musk has not found a way to migrate to Mars, he said with a shrug. We've seen the raw stats of this final boss and you might think the worst is over. You'd be wrong because the worst is yet to come. Technique and intelligence. You could summarize what I've said so far as me describing the specs of a gun, but even a nuclear bomb is nothing at the hands of an infant. Who wields said power and weapon also holds a very big difference, he said. The most fortunate or most unfortunate part of all this is that such power is in the hands of possibly the smartest non-human creature that ever roamed the earth. Leo is never defined by his size, speed, or build, but it's always his intelligence that stands out even more than the rest. But luckily, that stuff is too much to cover in the same video, so let's return back to the topic, which is just sheer power scaling. In conclusion, 99% of all living creatures are getting run over by Leo in the current timeline. Other lions? That's like bullying a baby. Tigers? We need to prepare life support. The tiger might survive but never win. Crocodiles. Maybe their great-great-great-great-grandfather preyed on dinosaurs. Bears. Leo is just a bear with better speed, mobility, and instinct, he said. Realistically, the only things that are beating Leo are the big three: hippos, rhinos, and elephants. And I don't want any of the glazers to say otherwise because that is delusional. Maybe you've let this image take you too far, he said. Then the screen showed some sneak peeks of Leo standing over two dead, torn open hippos and another image of a wounded Leo with a bloody face near a fallen rhino. Although the future holds possibilities, the current Leo that we see in the latest episode is still nowhere close to beating these giants. In conclusion, I would give Leo the power level of 9,000, with 1,000 being the absolute unit elephant, he said. The video ends. Third POV. They are moving again, Ramirez said while sitting beside the campfire. Although it was searing hot during the day, it was like winter during the night. In his hand, he had the drone controller with a screen on top. His hand was still bandaged and injured, causing him to lose some fluidity on the drone. The wound had not caught an infection, but it was still like controlling the drone with one hand. Sitting awfully close to his side and with her head resting on his shoulder was Hannah. Her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw that the Pride was in formation once more and moving during the night. Same strategy, same story. They are traveling during the night. It seems Leo is planning to return to the Serengeti with his Pride, she said and then paused. That would finally give proof to our hypothesis that Leo traveled hundreds of miles just to settle an old beef, Ramirez said before grinning. That's kinda badass. Remarkable too. Animals are not exactly known to be that vengeful. But I guess higher intelligence means you hold hatred longer too, she said. He is not going to be too happy when he returns, though, Malik said near the campfire. He was making sure the fire stayed burning while stirring the stew he was cooking. The Serengeti is now ruled by different lions, he said. Oh yeah? Easy work for Leo, Ramirez commented. Maybe, Malik said, but the thing is there are prides in the Serengeti now. It wouldn't just be like killing challengers or rogues. The females complicate things. Prides? Hannah asked, catching that small misuse of plural instead of singular. They were aware of the Four Musketeers and their pride, but were there others? You heard me, Malik replied and tasted his stew. He made a face. The thing he was cooking was still poison to the taste buds. It tasted like vegetable urine. The lack of meat made it hard to create good food. Leo ate their meat stock and they gave some too when they interacted with the cubs. So they were out of meat. Maybe they had not thought it through back then. He added potatoes to make the soup thicker. Maybe he should add some chili as well. If the food is spicy as hell, you wouldn't be able to tell if it's good or not. The Four Musketeers and their pride are not the only kings. They did a very bad job at guarding such a large territory. The other lions are making their pride in the rougher areas, Malik said. It's in the new update. Haven't you guys read the emails? Or are you still busy pondering what you two are? The two blushed at the call-out, but Hannah quickly cleared her throat, being the more mature person because she was older. Although both were still the same in relationship age, this being their first relationship ever. When you were a nerd and when you were as young as Ramirez, It was expected you had no experience. But how are there suddenly that many females in the region? Before there were none, Ramirez asked. Females are attracted to safety and resources. If a lion has those, the females just come. But during that phase, they are called territorial lions or bachelors, she said. Okay, but where do they come from is the question, Ramirez asked again. Hannah shrugged. Resources are scarce in the wild. Leo is a huge outlier in the way he could sustain such a big pride. A pride cannot grow that big, so even females often leave their birth pride to search for a new one or form an entirely new pride. There are also cases of small nomadic lionesses, often those who leave the pride to protect their cubs from the new king. When they hear a new roar or scent, they are quickly attracted. Even lionesses in a pride will leave and join a new one when they see a better opportunity. That makes sense, he said with a smile. You're so smart. And there she goes, suddenly being shy, much to Malik's disgust. He had the front row seat to witness the bloom of their relationship, and if he saw more, he might just vomit when he tried his stew again. Obviously, they wouldn't be a large pride. Leo's absence has only been a few months, not enough for prides to thrive, Dr. Thompson added. He was sitting opposite to Hannah and Ramirez, still staying near the campfire. He was barefoot and shamelessly warming his soles near the fire instead of wearing socks. He was looking at his laptop, where he watched the same footage Ramirez did. The drone's camera could be seen from different devices. Should take them a couple of weeks to return. But after that we are in for another epic tale to unfold. You really can never rest when you follow him, he said. I should send an email about this too, he said, making the footage appear in half a screen while he began typing away an email with the other. The group continued hanging around waiting for their evening meal to finish. Everyone was busy doing their own things. Their camp, which was almost permanent at this point, was starting to feel real cozy to them. I guess we also need to start packing if we want to follow them, Malik said after trying his stew again. Now it tasted edible. So much work to do, he complained. Don't worry, I'll help you, Ramirez offered with a smile. Thanks. In another few minutes, the food was done and the crew ate their dinner. They had the stew along with some bread and side dishes like fish paste and sauces. It might not be much, but what they were eating was good and nutritious food. They were eating well due to their driver and cook, Malik. But after they were done and sitting around the fire with full bellies, Dr. Robert suddenly spoke out with visible excitement. I just got the result from the institution. Doctor. Robert said that and immediately got the attention of the whole crew. More than a week ago, they sent Leo's blood sample along with the blood of Scar and the injured lion's blood sample. It was easy enough to get Leo's blood when they helped him clean his wounds, and Scar's blood, well, that was just taking it off the corpse. They sent it to Tawiri, Tanzania Wildlife Research Institute, and Robert had just gotten the result. But normally, he would just forward the result to the other members, but there was a huge discovery. Leo shared similar genetics with a few of the lionesses, including the new females he is very fond of. They are probably half-siblings and mother, but most importantly, the dominant lion in the plateau, he said. The two shared around 23% genetic makeup, meaning they are probably uncle and nephew, Dr. Robert revealed. An explosion went off in everyone's head. Shit, so Leo's father and that crippled lion were brothers, Malik said. Probably formed a coalition too and ruled that region in the plateau for a long time, Hannah continued. But then, there was conflict between the lions and a fight broke out for the sole leadership of the pride, Ramirez continued. Leo's father died, and the other brother was also crippled for life in the battle. Young Leo witnessed the whole thing and then later avenged his father's death, Dr. Thompson finished. Everything came together and fit perfectly like a puzzle. Damn, so the plot thickens, Ramirez said with a dramatic voice. They were not sure yet, but with the results of the blood, it would be much easier to create more hypotheses. But most importantly, they finally confirmed Leo's origin and where he came from. and the gods cursed the land after the battle between the brothers. Jealousy broke brotherhood. A taboo was committed when someone spilled their own blood and the prosperous land was no more, Malik said. Everyone stopped and deadpanned. What? That makes sense to me. You said Leo had to have come from a rich land considering his size at an early age. But we've seen the plateau is an absolute wasteland, he defended himself. They sighed and some smiled. Although they wouldn't disagree with that, sudden drought or the pride moving to the plateau afterward seemed more possible than bringing gods into the picture. By the way, which one of the lionesses is his relative? Or better yet, which one is the mother? Hannah asked with a curious tilt of her head. I'm not sure yet, but it should be sample number 7. I'm not sure which one that is. Why do you ask? I'm just curious if Leo is banging his own mother and sisters, she asked, rather innocently. What? How is that the first thing that came to your mind? Ramirez asked, a bit horrified. Well, it's not common but not rare either to find such cases. I'm more curious about what their offspring would look like, she said. Many new questions came as few were answered. But the researchers continued their work, tirelessly looking for answers. One day they would even make a documentary about this whole thing, so they needed every bit of information. First POV, 1 week later. With the amount of ground we were covering each night, I reckoned our return to the Serengeti would not be as fast as when we came to the Pride Lands. This was mainly because of the increase in our numbers. Groups with larger numbers have more issues and therefore could not move as fast. And also because, unlike when we came, we were not in that much of a hurry to return. I've memorized some landmarks, and we were not able to reach between those that we could before when we first traveled to the Pride Lands. So I expect a few weeks at least, maybe a month, until our return. We were not traveling for as long as we could. The moment we found prey, we hunted it down and oftentimes immediately camped there, not even using the whole night to travel. Due to this strategy, we were eating plenty of food. It could be said that we ate every day, although it was usually one meal, which was not much when shared across the whole pride. The reason why I was doing this was mainly because I wanted to fatten the newcomers as quickly as possible. They had been starved for a long time now and needed proper food to return healthy. I had no mate with Zuri because of this. Fun fact, a malnourished lioness could not go into heat. Perhaps if I tried, Zuri would definitely let me mount her, but I did not want to mate with her until both of us wanted to. I was able to with Nala soon after we reunited because she had been traveling for months prior to meeting me and was eating good and proper food. The state of the Pride Lands was not as bad when she left as well. So that was one of the reasons why I let the Pride eat so much and gave them plenty of time to rest. I wouldn't complain, though. The traveling was not a chore by any means. In fact, I quite enjoyed traversing different regions every now and then. I had accomplished my goal at last, and I took the situation as a holiday trip more than anything. I had plenty of females to mate with, had no lack of food, and did not need to ward off other challengers. What more could a king possibly want? The journey also provided a much-needed time for the pride to integrate with Scar's old pride. Lions were not humans in the way they hold grudges. Although they were at war a few weeks ago, they got along rather easily. They knew they couldn't help their situation and everyone was doing their duty at the time. Heck, my own pride attacked me when I first took over and that never became a long-term issue. The cubs of the Mbali brothers were also growing up rapidly. At this point, all of them could be considered subadults. The journey and the war, although they had not participated themselves, had sharpened them. They lost that spark of innocence and were entering adulthood. They also grew up to be big and fierce lions, mostly due to the diet I put them through when they were young. A cub that could feast on buffalo meat whenever they wanted, it was expected that they were all bigger than average. The pride really needed new cubs soon. Lainey, Kasai, Norin, and Kovu. These were the 4 cubs that Scar left behind. They were all below 6 months old and Kasai and Norin were twins. 3 of them were females, while Kovu was a male cub. They were the only members of Scar's old pride whom I considered innocent. They were too young to commit crimes and too young to have been brainwashed by Scar and his twisted ideology. They were a clean slate, little furballs of potential. If all went right, the female cubs would grow up to be important members of the pride. Kovu, on the other hand, would carry the legacy of his father when he could survive on his own. I'd like to think that although Scar was a villain in my story, he was not evil personified. Scar actually had good traits that were worthy to pass on, like his sheer persistence and cunning wit. So I hoped Kovu would carry all that good without any of the bad. As their king and now father figure, it was my duty to make sure of that. Parenting them was also good practice for when I became a real father and had cubs of my own. Usually, the eldest child became an experiment for the parents, but I was a lion. Luckily, I had another lion's cubs to practice on. Now climb the tree as high as you can. Whoever can climb the highest will get a mouthful of organs in our next meal. And remember, I am talking about my mouthful, not your tiny mouths, I said to the cubs while we stood before a large tree. The females were a little further in the background, sleeping peacefully because it was morning. The cubs, on the other hand, were furballs of energy that needed constant supervision. You would think that they would be like babies, sleeping most of the time, but no, they were incredibly active. Even more so than adult lions. If I were to describe their lifestyle, it would be huge short bursts of energy and a short nap, more bursts of energy and a short nap, and so on. They were not like the adults who are active for quite some time and then sleep for a long time. Luckily, I was a lion with sheer discipline. I would not allow myself to be lazing around, so the females got themselves a pretty good babysitter. Kasai, would you show the younger cubs how it's done? I asked the oldest cub among them to go first. Her name literally meant born of strife, and she was a strong cub, although she was not that much bigger compared to the other cubs. The little cub nodded her head before she began scaling the tree. I tried not to judge, since they were not me, who actively practiced climbing to build strength since young. But even her best effort was quite underwhelming. But on the outside, I showed a satisfied smile when she reached halfway and the second branch of the tree. After seeing that, a burst of motivation filled her and she tried to climb higher. But it would seem she bit off more than she could chew because I heard the crack of her claws slipping from the bark of the tree. "Ah, my lord," she said, trying to sound calm even though she wanted to scream. And then she fell. But I reacted quickly. I stood on my hind legs and righted my posture by pushing on the tree with my front legs. When I stood like that, I was able to reach her. I was very tall for a lion. "Got you," I said while pushing her small body on the tree with my head. The press made her stop. My thick mane provided a cushion, although I was literally pressing her on the tree. And with a gentle twist, I snatched her by the scruff and brought her back down. "Right, nothing to fear when I am around." "Okay, who's up next?" I asked, and then the two other cubs excitedly followed. They did well too, but they could never quite reach as high up as Kasai did. But I would say they did a pretty good job nonetheless. The last cub to try and climb the tree was Kovu. From his expression and posture, I could tell he would rather be anywhere on Earth than here. His siblings had posed quite the expectation to surpass, and I could see that he feared being the weakest. "Go on, cub, show me what you can do," I said. With a gulp, Kovu approached the tree. He first planted his paws on the tree, his claws digging into the bark. And then he lifted his hind legs and latched onto the tree. Now he was off the ground. And then, I tried my utmost best to hold my laugh. He simply latched onto that tree, not knowing how to pull himself up. Actually, when he planted his hind legs on the tree, his level dropped a bit, so he was lower than he would be if he just stood straight. Even after waiting for a few seconds, nothing happened. He tried, I saw his shoulder muscles moving, but he simply did not know how to climb, and he was too weak to carry his weight like that. In the end, he even closed his eyes and just held his position, as if thinking if he hung on long enough, he would automatically rise. I hummed and put my paw between the ground and the tree. For what it's worth, I had to twist my paw sideways to measure between the ground and his butt. But my vertical paw was a bit much, so I actually ended up pushing him up the tree a bit. "Okay, this is sad," I said out loud, and he widened his eyes and fell on my paw. The other cubs laughed at him and his ears fell. His small frame was able to fit on my paw, so I brought him up to my eyes. "You are going to be quite the piece of work, huh?" I said as his eyes shied away. "But don't be sad. It just means you have more things to achieve compared to the others," I said. "And that will make you stronger." With those words, I put him back on the ground and turned to the proud cub, Kasai. "It seems the oldest gets the organs for the next meal." "Good job," I said and patted her head before I did the rest with the others. 2 weeks later, after a total of 3 weeks of traveling, we were very close to the Serengeti. Nala told me that it was around this region where she met the lions who died under my jaw a few months later. She met Oba and his new coalition here. The wet season of the Serengeti had affected this region as well because it was full of green. The land was prosperous enough to hold a pride, actually. Perhaps there was a king in this region. After hunting down a lone antelope, I decided to camp here for the rest of the night and day. The pride shared the meal as usual. The lionesses who ate yesterday skipped this meal so there would be more for those who had not eaten yesterday. Zale was also eating the meal this time, so quite a number of lionesses decided not to eat because lions in general eat way more than lionesses. While he ate, my eyes lingered on him. He had been acting quite strange throughout the journey. I did not know exactly why I was getting the feeling, maybe because he was very proactive in every interaction the pride had. Like the sudden affection you would give to a family member that would die soon. But I thought nothing of it. The interaction between us was quite limited due to us both being adult lions at this point. He was not of my blood, and that created an unspoken barrier, especially when we were both grown. After we had our meal, the pride slept under the thick bushes and trees. I too sat down with a satisfied belly, but a little further from the pride because I was not ready to sleep just yet. And that was when it happened. Zale came up to me, and without saying a single word, he sat down close to me. His body rubbed against mine, more muscular and thicker than all the females. I looked at him but he wouldn't look back. Animals did not talk much. They did not need conversation to just socialize. Much of that is spoken with the language of the body. But after an hour or so had passed, he finally used words. Because what he said next could not be conveyed with body language alone. "I think it's time," he said. I turned to him and finally, his eyes looked at me. "I think it's time for me to leave the pride," he said. I was not going to lie to myself. I was surprised when I heard him say that. By all means, I should not be surprised. I've mentioned this before, too. The plan was always to kick him out of the pride after using him to defeat Scar's army. He had crossed the age of 2 years old quite a while ago. For reference, Scar kicked me out around that time. I think the reason for my surprise was that it came from him and not from me. He decided that it was time for him to leave the pride without me doing so. And to be honest, I had forgotten to do it. It slipped my mind somehow. Zale had been in my pride for a long time, and perhaps I had gotten attached to him. His splendid performance in the war only increased my favor. Had he not challenged me or shown dominance, I believe I would have been more than fine with him staying in the pride as my right-hand man or something of the sort. But that was just delusional thinking. The idea contradicts itself. I wanted a capable lion under me, but all capable lions had their own ego and wanted to form their own pride. A lion that was fine to stay under another would only be an incompetent, weak lion. "I see," was my only response while looking at his eyes. Now I knew the reason why he decided to sit beside me. It was his way of saying his final goodbye and a way of showing final affection to the lion who was his king for a year. Silence. A long silence where I processed his words. Then I asked, "When do you plan to leave? And where would you go?" "I'll leave right now," he said. "I've said goodbye to my mothers. And for where I am planning to go. I plan to stay in this region while you and the rest return back to the Serengeti. This land is fertile and good enough for a pride to thrive. I've also caught the scent of a dominant male around here, so my next goal would be challenging him and ruling this land for myself, he said. I raised an eyebrow. I had not even caught such a scent. But I guess that was because I was not searching for it. I was a king with 2 kingdoms. I leave scents, not search for one. So at least you have enough pride now to leave before being kicked out, I said with a smile. That was my initial thought as to why he decided to leave. If not for that, I see no reason why he wouldn't stay with me as long as possible. I provide the ultimate security and tons of food, which he could use to grow even stronger. Kind of like how I stayed in the Pride Lands for as long as possible even though I wanted to lash out at Scar more than once. The Zuri incident was merely my last straw. But he shook his head. It's not because of that. I did not want to leave on bad terms but on my own accord, with your blessing and permission, he said. That surprised me once more and made me realize one thing. The other lions were not like me. Perhaps I had been too self-centered in my thinking that I compared everyone else with myself. That was a clear sign of too much pride. Using yourself as a scale to judge everyone else. His voice also held weight where his words shouldn't. At first, you would think that he didn't want to be on bad terms with me because I was this strong, invincible lion in his eyes. But there was something more, like a son wanting to preserve a good relationship with his father even though they might go different paths. You have those, my permission and blessing. Did you eat your fill of our meal? Had I known that was going to be the last time I fed you, I would have felled a giant and not settled with an antelope the lionesses hunted, I said. There is no need, he said. I can handle myself from here on, my lord. Can you? I asked, completely out of reflex. He gave me a smile. I can. You've taught me well and raised me better. I reeled back at the honesty in his eyes before I quickly looked away and at the dark sky with stars. I did not teach him like how you would think. But I've shown him things, I've set him an example, and that was the same as teaching for lions who learn through copying the adults. If that is your decision, then I will respect that. Not as a king to his subject but as a fellow lion, I said. Thank you, he said and continued. Thank you for sparing my life when you should have killed me. Thank you for feeding me and protecting me when I was not even your own blood. It was my duty as king, I replied simply. You've set a high bar for me. I hope to become as great as you one day, he said. A silence yet again, and though this was long, it felt short. I wanted him to stay by my side a little longer. But such was not how nature worked. Zale stood up, his posture tall and ready. I knew right then that he was going to leave. This is goodbye, my lord, he said and simply walked away. Just like that. It seemed rather casual for an event so impactful. My eyes lingered on him as he walked away from me, and I couldn't help but notice some unsavory things. I shouted at him. Zale. He paused and then turned his head. Why are you walking like that? That is not how a lion should walk, I said to him. His posture and walking had been adapted to a lion living under another. It showed no dominance, pride, or ego. His head was always low, at the level of his shoulders, and his chest was retracted as if in the presence of someone mightier. That was good when he lived under me, but not anymore. Walk with your head held high and a chest so proud. Remember who you are. You are the son of the fierce warrior Macaulay. You have the size and strength of Baraka and the sharp mind of Roku, I said, and most importantly, you were raised by me. You have every reason to be proud. Set out and thrive in this land, for it wouldn't see a more remarkable lion, I said. That was my goodbye. Zale immediately fixed his posture. Now his head was held high, his chest broadened, and his shoulders planted firm. Had I seen his form on any other lion, it would piss me off. The form was basically asking for a challenge. And he decided to really act on my advice, and as always, he surpassed my expectations. Because as he walked away, he made a bold sound. Roar. A roar. It was the first time I heard him roar. The roar was loud and distinct. It was not a roar of dominance or challenge, but more like a bold declaration of individuality. And yet, strangely enough, I did not feel a wounded pride but a swelling pride seeing him and hearing his roar. He walked away. This time I did not stop him. I continued looking in his direction as he slowly disappeared from my view. And when the sun rose and the light made it easier to see, I no longer saw his form. He was gone, really gone. And my pride had lost a remarkable member. There was silence, but this time it was not a silence of peace but a silence of something missing. I hope I see him again. Zale. I will remember his name, his scent, and the sound of his roar. 1 week later, it has been a week since Zale left the Pride and a total of 4 weeks since we began our journey back home from the Pride lands to the Serengeti. After all this time of walking and traveling, we were finally at the outskirts of the Serengeti, my second home and my first kingdom. The first thing we noticed when we reached the Serengeti was the lush greenery and the plethora of animal life that filled the region. It was currently the peak of the wet season, meaning the Serengeti was as close to a paradise on earth as one could get. At this point, we did not even need the vultures to scout prey for us. Even now, if I smelled the scents in the air, I could pinpoint a dozen animals that were close to us. There was prey and resources like a pond wherever you looked. It was early in the morning and the Pride was once again resting during the day after walking the whole night. I reckoned we would not even need to do that anymore. We had completed the journey. Now it was just a matter of going to the central Serengeti, where the land was the most green. So this is where you went after you left the Pride lands? Zuri asked while coming beside me. We watched for a moment the sun that had already risen above the horizon and was showering the land with a golden hue. Yes. It reminded me of home, so I decided to settle here, I said. Although there were 3 lion kings who ruled the land at that time, I didn't let it stop me. It's a good land, she said while looking around. Indeed, almost comparable to the Pride lands. But the Serengeti is not always like this. It has different seasons. The paradise you see now can turn into a hellish land during the dry season, I said. She hummed an acknowledgement while I turned to look at her. Zuri was no longer skin and bones. She was starting to fatten up in the right places, and not just that, she was building muscles where it was necessary. With her current appearance, I reckoned it wouldn't be long until. But what about the kings? She asked suddenly. What? The scent of males in the air. Although you claim the land to be yours, it no longer carries your scent, she said. It smelled like other lions, I growled. I will deal with that later. And when I sniffed the air and took in the scent, I was confronted with the truth of her words. The Serengeti carried the scent of other lions. It was not a strong scent, but a lingering one. We were currently at the outskirts and smelling that was not a good sign at all. But I'm afraid I have more work in front of me than I would have liked, I said with a strained smile. Would it have been better if Zale did not leave the Pride? She asked, thinking that with his help my workload would be less. Zale was never a part of my rule in the Serengeti. I shook my head. His presence would not make a difference. I see, she said and then turned around. She flicked her tail ever so lightly at my nose when she turned. Then would I at least recommend that the king come to rest? If you are in for battles, the best you can do is to rest now while you still have the chance, she invited me. Well, how could I say no to such an invitation? I followed her back to where the Pride was sleeping and lay down among them. Usually I wouldn't rest so early, but I knew I had a tall task ahead when we would go deeper into the Serengeti. It did not take a genius to figure out there would be lots of rogue lions I would need to fight off. But alas, the only time I decided to take a rest, I was disturbed almost immediately. Roar. A roar echoed softly in the distance. It was not loud at all since it was far away, but it was also not quiet enough to ignore. I sprang up from lying down and looked towards the source of that roar. A growl left my throat instinctively, as that roar was as complete as it could get. It was a roar of dominance and territoriality. My first instinct was to roar back, but I stopped myself halfway. I would only wake up the pride if I did so. Although it hurts my pride, it was better to let the roar disappear in the wind for now. I would bestow a fitting punishment and tear out his throat when I met him. Grim, I called out to my trusty vulture as he came to me immediately. Let the vultures roam the sky of the Serengeti once more, and like usual, let them count their meals, I said. Report everything back to me. I want to know the exact state my kingdom has been in during my absence. As you wish, he said. And off he went, and all the vultures that I brought back from the Pride Lands. Their number had increased as well, since every other vulture we found on our way back also decided to follow us. They covered the sky like a dark cloud and flew into the Serengeti. The Serengeti. In the absence of its sole ruler, Leo, the kingdom had undergone drastic changes. What was once a huge kingdom with a sole ruler had now been split into 5 different parts. These 5 parts were all occupied by an individual pride. First was the Eastern Pride. A pride with a total number of 6 lions. The pride has 1 lion king and 5 different females. Second was the Northern Pride. It only has 4 members currently, with 2 lion kings and 2 females. Third was the Southern Pride with a total of 8 members. 3 lion kings and 3 females and 2 cubs. Fourth was the Western Pride with 5 members. 2 lion kings and 3 lionesses. And lastly were the 4 musketeers and their pride. They occupied the biggest and most prosperous part of the Serengeti. They were not as active or dominant as Leo, but they could be said to be the sole ruler of the region. The reason why the other prides exist was only due to their laziness and incompetence. Other than these 5 prides, the Serengeti was also filled with rogue lions that were actively searching for opportunities. Damn, Dr. Thompson cursed out loud as he was told all this information. And not just that, there were many screens in front of him that were displaying the current state of the lions. Along with Leo and his pride, the researchers had also made it back to the Serengeti. But unlike the pride, they did not linger in the outskirts but decided to join the rest of the crew that was camping in the Serengeti. The place they were in was the biggest camp in the Serengeti, a control station of some sort. It had a dozen members inside, and the other researchers who come and go could return here in case of emergencies and supplies. I can see why you do not want him to return, Dr. Thompson said. It's not just the 4 musketeers. Leo is bound to make enemies out of everyone if he decides to rule the Serengeti like he once did. It wouldn't be pretty, he said while looking at the research chief in the Serengeti. But while they were discussing, something happened on the screens that were showing live footage of the different prides across the land. A couple of researchers were all stationed near the prides to observe them. The lions looked up at the sky in alarm. Their tails stood up, ears perking to the limit while they were deciding whether to run or hide. When the camera turned to the sky, the screen showed the vultures. Creatures that were thought to be completely extinct in the Serengeti had now returned in waves, and they were more than ever. Some knew what their return signified, others didn't. But everyone knew to be wary. And it wasn't just the lions either. All the animals in the Serengeti knew what came with the vultures. A mega herd of buffalo were immediately plunged into chaos and panic when they saw the vultures fly above them. That was not a good sign to all the creatures, especially those smaller than a buffalo. In just a few minutes, the screens were no longer showing lions. The cameramen all decided to take footage of the sky where a wave of vultures flew past them. Already? Dr. Thompson asked himself. As someone who had been following Leo from day one, he knew what that meant. Leo was letting the vultures scout, and he would be on the move soon. It would seem whatever kingdom or rule that had been established in his absence would crumble faster than they appear. Southern Serengeti. The southern marshlands of the Serengeti were a different world after dark. The air was heavy, thick with moisture and the smell of wet earth. Mist clung to the grass, and the croaking of frogs rose and fell like a heartbeat beneath the sky. Fireflies hovered over the shallow pools, their soft light flickering across the reeds like scattered embers. This was not like the dry savanna of the north. Here in the south, the ground swallowed sound, and the place was damp. This part of the region was always the one to experience the wet season the most. It could be said that this part of the region was the most unsuitable for lion habitat in the whole Serengeti. It was overly wet during the wet season and also experienced the worst in the dry season. Even during Bali's rule, this region was considered a wasteland. But this place held a special place in someone's heart. Leo lived here and ruled this region before he defeated the three brothers. This part of the region was also where his copy was located. But now those were only history. No one remembered. Currently, 3 new kings rule this part of the Serengeti. 3 lions rested near the edge of a wide pool, their golden coats dimmed to bronze beneath the moonlight. Behind them, their small pride was asleep, 3 females and 3 cubs. But while the pride was sleeping, the kings were awake. Not because they want to, though, but because the vultures that appeared in the sky that morning still lingered in their minds. Upon seeing the unnatural flight of those carrion, no king could have peace of mind. Sorrow sat upright. He was the first leader among equals. He had a beautiful golden coat and a thick mane with dark ends. The glow of the moon outlined the proud curve of his shoulders. He was quite the remarkable lion, as were all lions who had enough strength to become king. "Do you hear that?" he asked his brothers. Beside him, Dax lay stretched out. Dax was a very average-looking lion that was known for his speed and intensity in fights. "I hear frogs," he muttered. "And more frogs." Sorrow shook his head. "No. Listen between the sounds. There's something missing." The third lion, Cain, was lying farther out. He was the youngest and the smallest among the 3, but he had with him sharp senses. "I think you are overthinking the situation, Sorrow. Nothing is happening." "I hear only natural sounds," Cain said. But even though Cain said that, he was not ready to sleep peacefully just yet. As stated before, the appearance of the vultures caused quite an impression on the kings. The 3 waited in silence, their senses always vigilant even though it might look like they were not doing anything. They listened carefully to the sound of the frogs and insects. Their noses were scanning every passing scent carried by the wind, and their eyes were watching, their inbuilt night vision always on the lookout. But what alarmed them a few minutes afterward was not anything they saw, smelled, or feared. Quite the opposite actually, it was the lack of them. At one point, the sounds faded away, the wind stopped blowing, and then there were no movements in their field of vision. Everything stopped, and somehow that was more unnerving than everything happening. "Now you can worry," Cain said. His voice became the only sound. After his words fell, there was a numbing kind of silence. The kind that made them hear their own breath and their own racing heart. They did not need to feel, they were quite literally told they were afraid. "Do you think it's the hyenas?" Dax said. And what a hopeful question that was. Perhaps in a world of sunshine and rainbows, it would be the hyenas. "Hyenas are the opposite of silence," Sorrow replied. At this point, no one was looking around or moving their ears to hear anything. They were literally frozen on the spot, their eyes moving from each other as if to communicate in silence. "Do you think it's him then?" Dax asked again, "the tailless one?" No answer was the answer. They had seen the vultures. They had been in the Serengeti ever since Leo was king, so they knew what that implied. But why would he come back and why here of all places? Sorrow asked, but it sounded more like a complaint to fate. If the old king really did return, why would he come for the pride that ruled the marshland of all things? Shouldn't he fight the ones occupying the central lands instead? The silence prevailed as the 3 lions waited for something to happen. And to their relief, something did happen. The wind started blowing again, and it carried with it a certain scent. It was a smell they were all too familiar with because that same scent used to mark every corner of the Serengeti. Now their heartbeat crashed. Their worst fears came true. They should have guessed. There was no other beast that could silence the whole ecosystem with his presence alone. "Let's go," Sorrow said and got up in a splash of dirty water. "Are we leaving?" Cain asked. "No, we are hunting," Sorrow replied. rather be the hunter than the hunted." And with that, the two lions followed, and they all went towards the direction of the smell. They moved through the forest like ghosts in the night. Even with their heavy frames, they were moving extremely quietly and swiftly. They were the ones being hunted by the old king, but what they had gained was too valuable to give up. So they moved with purpose and determination. Beating hearts became a drum of war in their chests. Fear turned into something sharper, aggression. You either run from fear or fight out of fear, and they decided to do the latter. When they reached the source of the smell, they were greeted with nothing but a tall tree. Sorrow walked forward and sniffed the tree carefully and pinpointed exactly where the scent was coming from. It came from the base of the tree. It seemed the lion had come into their territory and decided to leave a mark there. "He's not here," Sorrow said, and immediately the three kings entered a formation of sorts where they had each other's backs and faced different directions. They waited for a long time afterward, but nothing happened. Soon enough, sound returned to their surroundings, and that gave them some relief. "I think he is gone," Cain said. "Indeed. It seems he is not ready for a fight just yet and is trying to reclaim his territory without conflict," Sorrow said. "As if," he continued with a scoff, "we will not give up what we have out of fear." In their minds, that was a better strategy. Return to your old kingdom, make your presence known again, and hope the other lions give up their newfound kingdom out of fear for your former might. That's good to know. But then a voice suddenly came from behind the bushes. The lions immediately became alarmed again, and they closed up on each other even tighter. They moved under the same tree where Leo had marked his scent and looked towards where the sound came from. There was movement in the bushes, but the expected lion did not pop out. What came out instead was a vulture that was unnaturally large and healthy for his species. "Now we know this can only end in your deaths," he said, referring to himself as more than one even though he was alone. The lions gawked at this vulture with confusion. "Just to make sure, you are also the one who boldly roared this morning, right?" The vulture asked of the first of the equals, Sorrow. "Who are you?" Sorrow asked and growled towards the vulture. The deep vibrations were extremely intimidating in the quiet of the night. It seemed like the vibration had an increased volume as it shook the ground itself. But the vulture showed no fear. "Never mind, I was simply trying to show a final act of mercy before death," he said and then bowed. "Good night to you all, forever." The growl intensified to a completely different dimension. The deep vibrations now seemed to shake the air itself. It was so loud it could be mistaken for a small roar. It was guttural and frighteningly obvious that such a sound could only come from a ginormous beast. Sorrow himself was so surprised that he froze completely. But even then, even when he stopped growling, the sound continued. That was when it hit everyone that that was not him. The sound came from somewhere else. It came from above. Realization hit them like a bucket of ice water as all three lions looked up in sync. There, on the same tree that they were standing under, was something living, something breathing, something growling. The air thickened instantly. The faint light of the moon touched the branches and glimmered over fur so black it seemed to swallow the light instead of reflecting it. The lion's pitch-black mane made it almost impossible to make out the features of the beast. His ginormous form was tangled on the tree branches, wide paws and curved claws hanging on to hold the weight up the tree. It was like a nightmare given form to them. The only thing they saw in that dark silhouette were the almost glowing and piercing eyes. What they experienced next was like lightning of fear hitting the same place multiple times. The place being their heart. How long has he been up there? Fear. How could they miss something so big? Fear. He could have killed them and jumped at them any time. Fear. It was too late to do anything now. Fear. By the time the three kings reacted, Leo had also moved. From everything being silenced, now everything screamed. A roar so loud and violent made everything white and split the quiet night. It made their shocked screams void, like a noise during thunder. The lion, the one they feared most, leapt down from the tree. Gravity and momentum gave him impossible force so that when he crashed on Dax, he became tangled flesh and bone that only imitated a lion. One lion killed in 1 pounce. How horrifying it was would never be known, because none of the so-called kings of the Southern Pride survived. And Sorrow? He died when his neck was bitten and his throat ripped out. First POV, I defeated the kings of the Southern Pride with ease. How? Does it really matter how? Do I need to go into detail about how I demolished them? If we were going to talk about such insignificant activities, then we might as well describe every step of me pissing on the tree or describe in vivid detail how I savor a dead corpse. Because I see no difference. It felt the same to me as if I were handling dead corpses. I hurt them however I liked, made them get into whatever position I wanted, tore out chunks of meat wherever I desired, and the battle lasted for as long as it amused me. Lions, the absolute apex of this continent. Almost every creature that roamed the savannah feared them. But under my gaze, they were as helpless as an infant. They could not hope to outgrow the box that I put them in. They could have no other identity than that which I gave them. They were victims, completely and utterly. Kings, my butt. After I murdered them in the darkness of the night, they wouldn't make me lose a wink of sleep. I wouldn't wake up the next morning thinking I've earned breakfast. It was almost tragic, really. The way such mighty beasts were reduced to nothing but kittens in front of me. And it's getting easier still, I said while looking at their meaningless corpses. If I didn't focus, I couldn't see a fellow lion when looking at them. I was getting bigger, and I was only getting stronger. I was 4 years old, an age where I should have passed most developmental stages, but I wasn't quite at my prime. My prime would be at 6 or 7 years old. I wonder, at that age, would there be other lions at all? Or would even the second greatest king become a cat in my world? I would never have guessed such a worry would plague me. Maybe strength was a blessing, but invincibility a curse. The only challenge I could find at this point was multiple enemies. Like hundreds of hyenas or dozens of lions. I feared I wouldn't be able to feel the absolute thrill of a one-on-one fight like I did when fighting Roku or Scar in my youth. Or, a hippo or a rhino should pose a real threat to me. But why would I do that? I shook my head and kind of dismissed that silly thought for a moment. Imagine challenging such a beast only out of sheer need for a good fight. My intelligence just wouldn't allow such a silly risk. I walked over the corpses like I walked over the mud. I headed towards their pride and released a roar. Roar. The sound easily became overpowering. I did not roar with only dominance or a declaration of victory. I roared with sheer rage, aggression, and bloodlust. And my roar had the result I was hoping for. I heard panic growls from where the pride was, and then they left. I was in no mood to absorb more members into my pride. They could run to other kings in the meantime. I did not want them. Heck, I did not feel like I won anything at all. Victory demands struggle, it demands equal opposition, and I found none tonight. My being itself was already too much. Launching an ambush like I did only made it more ridiculous. After I heard the sound of their fleeing pride, I turned around to head back to my own pride. They already slept through the whole day, so most of them should be awake. They probably heard my roar, too, and were assured of my victory. I planned to lead them to my old copy after this, and then they could live normally there while I mow down the remaining frauds. Tonight taught me that I had nothing to reclaim. My house had just had a few pests living in it while I was gone. My mentality changed. Now I refuse to acknowledge their claims. Third POV, an estimated weight of 430 kilograms. Are you insane? Doctor. Emmanuel asked in shock while looking at the latest portfolio the crew had made on Leo. Doctor. Emmanuel had been the chief researcher here in the Serengeti after Dr. Tonson left to follow Leo back in the Pridelands. No, did you miss the plus sign we added after the number? Dr. Tonson asked while looking at Dr. Emmanuel with dead-ass eyes and sipping a cup of coffee. It was instant coffee, but he had built a taste for it over the years. Now a good coffee tastes like shit to him. So you think he weighs over 430 kilograms? He asked again, looking directly at Dr. Thompson's eyes. Yes, the answer came without missing a beat. That would make him the largest recorded feline in history. Bigger than the Siberian tiger and the ligers in captivity, Dr. Emmanuel stated. Did I stutter? He asked and put down the cup. He was already around 400 kilograms when he left the Serengeti, so I don't know why you are surprised. In fact, his growth rate had plummeted drastically. Dr. Emmanuel put down his sunglasses to rub his eyes in disbelief. He was wearing shades even though it was night. It's a personal trait for him at this point. The Serengeti was very sunny, so he used them lots during the day, and at one point, he simply wore them every moment of the day. Maybe because we have been with Leo all the time, but I find your reaction quite amusing. I guess that's how normal researchers would react, Dr. Thompson commented. Are you sure you are studying an African lion? I don't know. Has it ever crossed your mind that you might be studying a Nemean lion? Unfortunately, we've done a DNA test, and he is an African lion. No genetic hints of other lions like the cave lions or American lions either, he said. God really be making anything, Dr. Emmanuel said. He picked up the file again and read through Leo. The portfolio had much other data as well, like the average consumption, the length, the blood type, the lifestyle, the testosterone level, etc. His paws are 11 inches wide. Are you kidding me? That's basically 1 foot, Dr. Emmanuel asked again. Dr. Thompson just shrugged. Leo is a huge lion, and his paws have always been unnaturally big too because he has to make up for balance without a tail. Doctor, please, that's as wide as a whole lion's skull, Dr. Emmanuel said. I think we should give you the opportunity to see him with your own eyes. Maybe then you will not be so incredulous. Fair warning though, those data did not do him justice. His paws, when they lay flat on the ground with his weight, spread even wider. You can fit your head in his paw print, he said. The two continued to discuss the data inside the rather large tent erected in the camp. It was mostly just Dr. Emmanuel pointing out ridiculous measurements and Dr. Thompson assuring him that it was all true. But as they were talking, the radiophone kept on the table rang with buzzing sounds. That interrupted their conversation. Dr. Emmanuel picked up the phone immediately. Hello, this is the base camp, he said. On the other side of the phone, a freaked-out voice almost shouted, Leo attacked the Southern Pride. What? Dr. Emmanuel stood up. Okay, stay calm and record the footage carefully. Don't get too close and don't be afraid. Leo has good relations with us humans, he said to calm down the caller. That's the thing, Chief. The fight is over, he said. It's over. Dr. Emmanuel asked in confusion. Then why did you not call sooner? We did. We called as soon as we could. It's only been minutes since the fight started. The kings of the Southern Pride are already dead. And then before they could say more, a vicious roar tore through the conversation. Everyone froze. They could hear it through the phone and also echoing in their ears. I've always thought you underestimated him a bit too much ever since you recommended Leo should not return for his own safety after some random coalition came from the Masai Mara, Dr. Thompson said. I agreed with your statement back then, but not because I was worried about Leo, but for the rest of the lions that are here. Now you know, Dr. Thompson said. Documentary, Episode 5, Name, Dr. T. Somatonson Role, Lead Researcher, in the African Savannah, there are apex predators. On land, the lions are the most remarkable and dominant predators that roam the land. But in the murky waters of the savannah, it is the crocodiles that rule. Both are apex predators that rule different terrains, and ensured survival was a privilege to the rest of the animals that lived there. Dr. Tonson began the new episode immediately. Unlike the previous episode, this one was not delayed and came out only a week after the previous episode drop. There was no need for reintroduction as the hype and anticipation were still unbroken. But a question that has plagued many generations is this: who is the better one among these two apex predators? What happens when these two species face off against each other? The documentary showed brief footage of both predators in their most violent and raw state. It blurred now and then when Dr. Tonson said their name, giving a palpable tension to the episode immediately. This question of ours was answered shortly as Leo and his pride came into conflict with a group of Nile crocodiles in the biggest watering hole of the Serengeti, he said. And it all began with innocence, he said, and then the screen changed. The documentary showed the lives of cubs. They were not infants anymore. They had grown. But they still had juvenility in their nature and were perhaps at their cutest stage. The viewers saw hints of an apex predator in them, but the cubs had not passed the threshold just yet. They were dangerous but only dangerously cute at that stage. During the dry season, water becomes currency. Dr. Tonson's voice came over the footage, but it was also during this time that water becomes a graveyard. The water has eyes and teeth, he said. The footage showed crocodiles hiding underwater with only their snouts showing. They looked like logs floating above murky water, but if you looked closely, you would see the blinking eyes that saw everything and the rows of sharp teeth held by one of the strongest jaws in the animal kingdom. The cubs were clueless. They had not even lived a year in the Serengeti, so they were ignorant, he said. The sad thing about innocence is that it often comes with ignorance. The cubs were alone. Lions are not known to be early risers, so while the rest of the pride were sleeping, the cubs headed together towards the lake. They didn't even know it was dangerous to do so. After all, they had witnessed countless times how the pride would stay together near the riverbeds and cool down from the heat, he said. Crocodiles know the apex predators of the land. They would never attack them when a pride is in groups. But when small cubs decided to come close by themselves, that's a different story, sadly, he said. Crocodile instinct especially comes alive during the dry season. All animals are desperate, and the watering holes have shrunk massively. There were no small ponds that the animals could drink from. They had to come to the bigger waters, where the crocodiles live. So the cubs were quickly seen as prey, he said. The footage showed the cubs reaching the watering hole. They drank the water and played around the riverbed for a while. They were extremely active, chasing each other and play fighting now and then. Afterward, they did something that sealed their fate. They dived into the water and began swimming. They were playing, splashing each other with water and finding the cool under the rising heat. The cubs are affected by the adults. In this case, Leo, who we see bathing in the water almost every day or doing some strength training there. They copied this behavior, it seemed, because normally, cubs wouldn't swim in water bodies. It is not just in their nature, he said. The footage cut to crocodiles that quickly sank below the surface and began swimming towards the cubs. There was a snap, an explosion, he said over the footage. The water exploded, and the cubs cried. They never saw it coming. They did not know the water had jaws. Then blood. Blood began pooling. One crocodile could be seen swimming away with a corpse in its jaw. Another crocodile came to steal the kill, and with a violent tug, they tore apart the dead cub into more parts they could share. It was not just one crocodile that attacked but multiple. Fortunately, the cubs were swimming in the shallow parts. But still, among the 9 cubs, only 7 came back on land. They ran, scared and panicking. The documentary played those horrific scenes with no censoring. The audience could not help but curse at the researchers for not stopping those horrible things. If they could capture the whole thing on camera, why didn't they stop it? And when the king heard about this, a war began, he said. A short war that began due to the loss of innocence. It ended with a pool of red. Name: Dr. Adrian Vossroll, herpetologist, crocodile specialist. A new doctor was introduced for this specific part of the documentary. Dr. Adrian Voss was a world-renowned herpetologist. He was of European descent, with blonde hair and brown eyes. The cubs are the future of the pride. So when these crocodiles killed the cubs, it was like they were killing a very important member of the pride. Although their bodies were small, perhaps the crocs had bitten off more than they could chew, he said. The footage cut to Leo as he was running towards the watering hole. The rest of the pride followed behind him, but they were lagging due to Leo's sheer acceleration. The whole pride was angry, the king even more so, he said. When Leo reached the watering hole, there was absolutely no fear or caution in his form. He did not loiter around or waste time dwelling on the shore. He jumped right into the water. A huge splash greeted him as liquid screamed at the force. After that explosion came a splitting roar. Perhaps this is the first time I've seen an animal jump into the water to challenge the crocodiles. The reptiles are the kings of the water, so Leo jumping into the water was akin to him jumping into their territory and their history that spanned till the prehistoric era, he said. It was, in every sense of the word, a complete disrespect to the fellow apex predators. You could tell the sheer rage that Leo was feeling in that moment. Usually, he would be too smart to do such a reckless thing. It also highlights the big heart that he has, to mourn that much for cubs not even his own. The scene was a reminder of what it means to be king, he said. The documentary showed the full video of this and then some. At this point, the researchers had reached the area and offered real camera footage, not just a view from the drone. The Nile crocodiles are one of the most perfect ambush predators in the world. As adults, they can grow up to 17 feet and weigh over 900 kilograms, he said. But what do you know? The first thing the group of crocodiles did after Leo jumped into the water was run away as fast as possible. Animals can differentiate between prey and danger, and in that moment, Leo was ringing the alarm of nothing but danger, he said. Leo could be seen in the water, splashing it violently as if trying to hit the reptiles that lived below the murky surface. He roared and looked around, searching madly for the ones responsible for the cub's death. But after a while, when it had calmed and it was time for an ambush, the crocodiles moved. Amid the murky water, a large crocodile rocketed out. Leo had no time to react to the sheer speed, and one of the strongest jaws in history found its mark on his arm. They can bite at 3,500 psi. That's triple the force a lion can deliver with its jaw. The sheer force is enough to crush buffalo bones like wood, he said over the footage. But after the chaos calmed and the water rested, you could see Leo looking at the crocodile that was biting his arm with an unervingly calm face. He did not panic or try to escape like prey would. It seemed his lack of reaction even surprised the crocodile. It did not know what to do afterward. Was it an attack? Or was it the crocodile foolishly making himself vulnerable? After a long moment of silence, the water exploded again. After the 1.5 tons of pressure, the crocodile entered a death roll. At this phase, the croc could deliver over 8,000 newtons of sheer torque. But soon after the explosion, it stopped. The crocodile was completely frozen and instead awkwardly floated up to the surface of the water with its belly raised, like it was stopped mid-roll. The crocs were dealing with another enemy entirely. Leo might not be as big as a buffalo, but he too understood leverage, and he stopped the death roll before it could gain any momentum. Leo took advantage of the raised belly and raked lines across it. What happened next was the crocodile's insides being pulled out. The part that was not protected by tough scales was easy for Leo to absolutely violate. When the crocodiles smelled blood, they went into a frenzy. That is when it fully turned into a war, he said. The documentary continued. The raw footage of Leo battling against a swarm of these reptiles was played in full. The researchers provided insight into what was happening, sometimes stopping the video or slowing it down for the audience to comprehend what the hell was going on. The truth was that everything was so violent and happened so fast that it was hard to understand anything in the chaos. Third POV. Documentary Episode 5. The footage continued. The water trembled again. After the first crocodile exploded, The water never became calm again. From beneath the murky water, more shapes began to emerge. The shrunken lake was starting to behave like it was alive, like it was breathing, like it was exhaling death. When blood spills in the water, the chemical cue is immediate. Crocodiles can sense it from hundreds of meters away through the water's vibration. What happened next is what we call a feeding frenzy, Dr. Voss said. The crocodile, which Leo had raked across the belly, swung its tail and tried to swim away. But as it swam, it dragged its own insides in the water, and it could not swim far before the water pulled it out again and it floated dead on the surface. But that wasn't even the main thing that caught the audience's attention. The footage slowed down. They could see the black outlines below the surface, a long, deathly jaw that pretended to be a log. There were dozens of them. And then they struck. The worst part was that they did so together. One jaw was terrifying, dozens were horror. The lake exploded. A wave of scales, teeth, and tails tore through the shallow water. They swam straight towards Leo like a wave of a tsunami. It was the battle of two kings of elements. It was rage versus hunger. We have no clue how many there were. They looked like the whole lake, Dr. Voss said over that horrifying footage. There was no clear view of what was happening. Only flashes of movement. Splashes of red. The water heaved like a boiling cauldron. The camera zoomed, but it was almost impossible to make sense of what was going on. So to help the viewers understand what was going on, the footage would pause and the screen would change into a CGI animation of what was taking place, getting rid of all the splashes of water and all the blood and only focusing on the animals. 3 of them had latched on, Dr. Voss continued, one on his arm, one on his torso, and another on his mane and part of his head. Each one of them is pulling in opposite directions. They were trying to drag him down, but each was going about their own way. They ended up almost tearing him apart instead. This is why we called it a frenzy. There is no teamwork, no coordination. The video continued again, and with the help of those details, the audience could somehow begin to make sense of what was going on. When the footage continued again, Leo's roar greeted them and pierced through the other sounds of chaos. It was quite the guttural roar. It was rough and rumbling, and it almost sounded like a gargle, like Leo was half-drooling when he roared. He honestly sounded like he was in pain. But even when he was in such a situation, his reactions were frighteningly calculated, Dr. Voss said, his tone a bit shaky now. The footage zoomed in on Leo's action. "See here," he said, "Leo doesn't pull against the bite. That would make the wounds worse. Instead, he moves with the force. He lowers his center of gravity, stabilizing himself using the ground beneath." One of the things that we noticed here is that even though it looked like Leo was blinded by rage, he never really ventured that far from shore. The ground was still beneath his paws. He was not helpless at all. Most prey animals fight the pull, but he directed it and somehow neutralized the raw strength of reptiles bigger than he. The footage resumed. Leo's claws flared under the water, long and curved, striking beneath the belly of one of the crocodiles. The reptile twitched violently, releasing its grip. Then he turned on the one clinging to his torso. His jaw opened, sinking into its head near the eyes, biting down with a crunch that sent blood into the water. His actions were hidden under the murky water, so what most of the audience saw was blood red exploding beneath the crocodiles now and then. The eyes and nose are their most vulnerable parts, Dr. Voss explained. Once those are damaged, they lose orientation, and panic sets in. Leo's bite, speculated to be around 2,000 psi by this point, might be lesser than the crocodile's, but he knew just how to use it. The sound that followed was horrific. The crocodile had primitive vocal cords, but those were worked to the limit. Their scream underwater sounded like a prehistoric cry. The footage showed Leo pushing through the water, his massive frame now surrounded by more movement. Crocodiles circled and lunged at him with reckless abandon. But their form of attack was much too simple. Crocodiles drown their prey, so they don't know how to aim at the vitals. Leo began feeding them his muscled forearm, bearing the brunt of their attack and then attacking from under to tear their vulnerable parts. A simple and effective form of hunting prey became simple and almost useless when faced with a smarter enemy. The water splashed again. More crocodiles joined from the deeper end. There were too many to count. But Leo was no longer alone. The camera turned to the shoreline. A line of lions had gathered, their golden bodies tense, ears flat, and tails lashing. They were so ready to jump into the water with their king. Because guess what? They were just as angry. The loss of the cubs was felt by all, not just the king. Think of their mothers. Leo turned his head for only a moment and roared again. The command was clear. Come. The viewers swore his roar sounded like that. That's when the pride finally moved in, Dr. Voss said. 17 adult lions charged together into the shallows. The water exploded under their weight as they joined their king. It was a rare sight. Crocodiles are apex predators in water, lions on land. These two species do not wage war. But that day, they did. The camera panned wide. The battle looked like a nightmare. Crocodiles twisting and lunging, lions slashing and roaring, the lake turning dark with blood and mud. Leo stood at the center of it all. Every time a crocodile lunged, he intercepted. He grabbed one by the snout and slammed it sideways. Another came for his flank, so he turned and bit its neck after flipping the reptile over. His claws dragged across bellies, raking open flesh. You can see it here. Leo is choosing his targets. The ones that come close enough to attack him or his pride, he meets head-on. The others he ignores. He's prioritizing threats. He lets his pride do the heavy hitting, and he is covering for every one of their weaknesses. The pride mirrored his previous movement. They learned from his violence. Footage showed lionesses flipping smaller crocodiles onto their backs. Some dragged them to the shore, where others joined in to finish the job. The sound of roaring and hissing filled the air. The camera shook violently at times because the researchers on site had trouble keeping their distance. The scene became so chaotic that the team had to back off at one point, Dr. Voss said. The water had turned into liquid blood. Even the air smelled of death. Another aerial view was shown from the drone. The entire watering hole was red. Dozens of dark shapes floated, some still moving weakly, others still. The lions stood over them, panting heavily, their fur soaked in blood and mud. We do not know how many crocodiles were killed during the 15 minutes that the fight lasted. Most were wounded and sank into the deeper waters, never to be seen again. The footage changed to the aftermath of the battle briefly. This footage showed many dead crocodiles and maimed bodies that washed up on the shore the next morning. And some bodies were washed ashore. The apex predators of the water became food to scavengers, Dr. Voss said, showing how the vultures and other scavengers ate the corpses of the crocodile. The footage changed again, this time showing Leo standing in the shallow waters, chest deep red, his mane dripping blood. His body heaved with every breath, and yet he stood there, relieved and his rampage quenched. When the war ended, the lake was silent. Not because it was calm, but probably because most in it were dead. In nature, revenge is a human word. But if there was ever an animal that understood it, it was him. The final drone shot rose higher and higher, showing the vast Serengeti with a lake of blood at its heart, a dark red wound beneath the golden land. The waters yielded to the king of land that day. Name: Dr. T. Somatanson. Role: lead researcher. After the documentary showed the brutal war between the lions and the crocodiles, it gave some time for the audience to rest and unwind from the things they had witnessed. Leo had been popular way before this documentary was released. Rumors and leaked images had gone viral on the internet about how Leo once massacred crocodiles, but it was never proven true. But now those rumors were proven, and evidence was in front of their faces, undeniable. They had literally just witnessed lions versus crocodiles, something they had dreamed of at least once in their childhood while learning about animals. It gave the ultimate answer to the generation-long question. The documentary showed footage of lions resting and time-lapsed scenes of the pride recovering from their injuries. It gave drone footage of the passing days. But after a while, the slow melody that was playing over those footages stopped. The screen darkened. And when it lit up again, Dr. Tonson could be seen sitting in that same studio-made office of his. The war with the crocodiles was only one of the many battles that Leo fought in the dry season. That war was only the appetizer to all the blood that would follow, Dr. Tonson said. In the savannah, there are two seasons that shape life and death, the wet and the dry, he said ominously. The wet season is mercy. The dry season is judgment, he said. Water did not flow in the Serengeti, but something thicker did, and that was blood. The footage changed from Dr. Tonson to the wide aerial shots of the Serengeti turning pale, its lush green shrinking into a dull gold. Patches of cracked soil split the ground like scars. Herds moved slowly northward, kicking up dust that trailed behind them like smoke. It was the first dry season since Leo became king, Dr. Tonson's voice played over those footages. For most lion kings, the dry months are the hardest period of their reign. Food becomes scarce, water becomes currency, and challengers become inevitable. And for Leo, this season was very much similar in its difficulty, but in a completely different way. For him, it was not a season where he became weaker, smaller, or starved. It was a season where he turned from this just king to a killing machine. A monster in lion's clothing that slaughtered his own kind. The drone footage showed Leo. He was 3 years and 6 months old now. His mane was darker and fuller than ever before. His frame was enormous, muscles flexing visibly beneath his hide with every step. The scars across his shoulders and flanks caught the sunlight like cracks in gold. At this age, Leo reached his physical peak. His estimated weight was between 365 and 380 kilograms, nearly 100 kilograms heavier than the average adult lion. His forelimbs alone produced a striking force of 3,000 newtons, equivalent to being hit by a sledgehammer swung at full force. His bite force was triple that of other lions, sitting at around 2,200 psi, and his ability to accelerate made him a living landslide that could charge at a moment's notice, Dr. Tonson said as the footage circled around Leo, showing him in all his beastly glory. And yet, none of that strength was used for hunting this time of year. It was all used for war. The next footage transitioned to the savanna plains at sunrise. The camera followed Leo as he stood over the corpse of a dead lion, his mane rusted with blood. The young challenger's throat was crushed, and his brother's body lay not far away, already being picked apart by vultures. By the start of the second month of the dry season, Leo had already fought over 46 recorded challenges. The challengers were not random either. They were driven here, pushed by hunger and thirst. Not only for the physical aspect but also the abstract, they were hungry for rule and thirsty for power, he said. This is what we call the lion convergence effect. When drought hits, every rogue within 100 kilometers gravitates toward the same fertile territory. And Leo ruled one of the last green corridors that still had shade, water, and prey. The scene cut to a map, showing a wide red area labeled Leo's territory. It stretched across multiple dried riverbeds and bordered what was once the Mbali brothers' land. His kingdom was roughly 5 times the size of a normal lion pride's territory. It was a gift of victory and a curse of attention. The Mbali brothers before him ruled only a fraction of this land, even though they claimed all the territory. They also had each other. Leo had no one, he said. The footage returned to Leo dragging a challenger's body across the dust. The audiences were wondering what he was doing until he reached a boulder and proceeded to slam the lion's head against the stone multiple times in a raw display of violence. Dr. Tonson spoke quietly, almost in respect. If you want the full footage of this battle, you may refer to kingsarchive.com. But for a moment, let me give you context to what is happening. At this point, Leo no longer fought to prove dominance. He fought to eliminate repetition, he said. When he spared his enemies, they healed, formed coalitions, and returned. So he adapted to become this monster that had no mercy, no hesitation. He walked the line between cruelty and efficiency, he said. The next half hour of the documentary showed montage clips of multiple battles across the savannah. Different challengers, different terrains, different situations, but all ending the same way. Leo's mane grew darker with blood, his patience thinner, and his expression more distant as he stood over dead bodies. The average territorial male faces 5 or 6 serious challengers during the season. Leo faced nearly one every 2 days. By the end of the dry season's second month, his kill count was over 50 confirmed lions, he said. It got to the point that we, as researchers, grew absolutely worried over the ridiculous kill counts. At this rate, he himself could wipe out all of the species in just a few years. The footage slowed down after that. The montage was over, and it showed Leo standing under the rising sun. His body reflected shallow wounds and scars. His face was also different. People could realize instantly that all the killing had changed Leo somehow. Dr. Thompson's voice echoed, explaining the scene. The euphoria of dominance had faded. Killing had become work. And Leo had grown numb to all. The camera zoomed in on Leo's face alone. He seemed to be looking straight at the camera, and he seemed to know that people were watching him. His eyes looked barely alive. The stress levels recorded through observation showed abnormal consistency, an indicator of chronic combat fatigue. In humans, this would be equivalent to burnout or combat exhaustion. The footage zoomed out and showed that again, there was another corpse beside his body. Leo walked away from the corpse, panting, and began roaring into the wind. The sound rolled like thunder across the plain. Dr. Thompson continued, his roars during this time were measured at 117 decibels from 100 meters away. For comparison, that is louder than a chainsaw and close to the threshold of human pain. It was the roar of frustration and anger. It was the shout of a king so done with all the bloody battles that he hoped to scare away all challengers with his roar, without resorting to killing yet again. We could tell from this that Leo was actually not very fond of what he had to do and all that he had done, he said. The camera continued following Leo as he slowly walked across the dry savannah and returned back to his pride. When he reached the pride, they greeted him by standing up and getting physical contact to greet him. Their heads dipped down when he passed, and they made way for him to reach the carcass of a buffalo that lay at the center of the pride. It was half-eaten but still fresh with all its organs intact. But on the bright side, the lionesses had adapted beautifully to his rule. They had learned to hunt larger prey independently. The buffalo herds, once untouchable, had splintered due to the drought. This made them slower and more vulnerable, so even without the king's help, the pride hunted successfully every 2 days. When Leo was tired from the battles, the pride supported him by feeding him everything he would need, he said. The footage cut between the lionesses dragging down a buffalo, successfully hunting it down, and transitioned to Leo tearing at the organs of the bull they killed. Lionesses typically weigh between 120 and 180 kilograms, but Leo's females average higher, at around 190 kilograms each, due to muscle growth from constant movement and hunting. In all seriousness, you know that this was not a lazy pride. This was a nomadic army that Leo had built. The scene continued as Leo chewed into the buffalo's heart, black blood spilling down his jaw. 2 lionesses beside him groomed his wounds, licking the fresh cuts along his neck and shoulder. They also played the role of nursing him when he returned wounded from battle. Their tongues removing infection, cleaning his battle wounds, and preparing him for the next challenge, he said. The camera focused on the scarred side of his body. His muscles twitched from pain, not pleasure. He was making low growls while tearing through his meal as the 2 lionesses nursed him. His wounds were shallow but constant. Most were cuts, punctures, and bruises. They were minor but collectively debilitating. The average lion requires 2 weeks to fully heal from a serious fight. But Leo never had 2 days. Afternoon, the sun slowly rose into the sky and came back down. It was the afternoon of the same day, and the documentary showed footage of Leo leaving his pride once again, walking under the burning sun. The camera also caught the infamous vulture that was always beside Leo, and people were familiar with him at that point. Unlike most males, Leo did not wait for challenges to find him, but instead, he hunted his challengers. He used an aerial companion, a vulture, who had learned to signal him from the sky. Together, they patrolled vast distances daily, a unique partnership rarely seen in mammalian behavior and something the documentary had covered before, he said. A slow pan followed Leo's shadow as he walked. The grass crunched dry beneath his paws. This behavior is unprecedented among lions. Instead of defending a single core area, Leo adopted a patrol radius of nearly 90 square kilometers. It was a range more akin to migrating elephants than territorial cats, he said. And in doing so, Leo had changed what it meant to be Lion King entirely. The voice faded away. The footage was that of Leo walking through the savannah as it slowly panned away. It indicated it was the end of the episode. But the voice of Dr. Tonson came again right before everything went dark. Leo did not even get to rule for the complete dry season, and yet by the end of his first dry season, Leo had fought 103 battles, killed 87 lions, and lost none.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.